Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for tuning into LCC Remix, where we unpack the latest message in a deeper way. We hope this episode encourages and speaks to you.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of LCC Remix. We are the three amigos this morning, as opposed to the four horsemen.
Yeah, I prefer that.
You prefer the four horsemen?
Oh, no. For the three amigos.
Three amigos.
Don't want any part of that four horsemen thing.
Yeah, this is true. But Steve is out of town today, so it's three of us talking about our new series, Big Faith for Little Hearts. And we kicked it off on Sunday. And I felt like Sunday was really kind of almost like when you're on an airplane getting ready to take off and they say, put your own oxygen mask on first before you share it with your children or significant other next to you. In that, the question that we talked about was like, do I have a faith that's worth passing on? Like, and I looked at it from the perspective of each of us, that personal responsibility of repentance in itself, and how do we view our relationship with the Lord, and is our relationship with the Lord something that our kids, the next generation, sees in real life and sees in real time, and not just in little snippets, on Sundays or other small parts, but it's just something that they are able to watch in real time each and every day as we go on. So it really was, coming from that perspective. And part of the thought on this series is to look at what the Old Testament says about the next generation and what should be passed on, and then look at it through Jesus' eyes in the New Testament and how the New Testament plays into that as well, as we are under the new covenant now. So the big idea is really that idea that the gospel is pretty fragile, honestly. I don't know if you guys have experienced it at some point where you've seen, the gospel really disappear from a family unit in that one generation. I've seen it a little bit, where it begins. I read a book a long time ago called The Slow Fade, and it talked about, specifically kids coming out of high school, going into adulthood, going into college, and their faith was such that it was based on a lot of what I do as opposed to who I am. And so they hit college and basically were confronted with a lot of different philosophy and weren't strong enough in their faith to combat that, I guess you could say, in their own minds, not necessarily defend it in class, but to combat it in their own minds. And so trying to get ahead of that, which again leads us to the fact that we're doing the next couple of weeks here, the I don't have enough faith to be an atheist series, which really attacks that specific issue and problem that we have with specifically young adults.
Yeah, until you make it your own, you can't live on a borrowed faith, and I think that that came up, and it's hard to do it with anything, especially when your faith, and so it's if it hasn't become a relationship, if it is a sense of duty or rules to keep, or that can take a back seat to peer pressure or whatever very quickly. It's hard to do that with a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to be very careful. It would be interesting if people would be honest, how many, even in our churches, how many adults actually have a relationship with the Lord as opposed to following a set of rules, or what we just call religion, having a religion. Mm-hmm. And because if you just have a religion, if you just have a belief system, someone can possibly talk you out of that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that so in the world they're inclined, especially in colleges and stuff. That's what a lot of people. The world is inclined to do that. They want to talk you out of that religion, or belief system, or just minimalize it or marginalize it. Whereas if you have a relationship with the Lord, it's hard to do that with a relationship, and so and that's what are we passing along? Are we passing along a set of rules, or are we passing along this life-giving relationship we have with Christ? And that becomes blurry. Those lines become blurred for people. And So anyway,
there's
go ahead.
It kind of brings up the difference between, like, as kids, doing something. The reason behind it. Okay, so like, are you doing this because you don't want to get in trouble, because the repercussions of not doing it are worse, or are you doing it because you want to do it? Because, for like a kid to the parent relationship, are you doing this because you're going to get in trouble with dad, or are you doing it because you love dad? And that's that like crossover point where it's not about somebody could talk you out of doing something like, oh yeah, if you do this, you may break a rule, but the punishment's only going to be blah, 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 versus do this. Well, but that's going to hurt their feelings. That's going to hurt the relationship. It's not as easy to be convinced. Yeah. Right. So, a lot of it, I think a lot of it comes down to the reason why you're doing it. Are you doing it to follow rules so that, to prevent a negative, or are you doing it for the positive? Yeah, I guess is the best way I would say it. When you said, when you were talking, Aaron, about, are we modeling what the kids, what we want them to emulate, right? When we did the 1-day conference in the parenting breakout specifically, that was a question we asked. If your kids as adults had the same kind of faith walk that you did, would you be satisfied with that? Mm-hmm. Do you think that is where they should be? As parents, I think we naturally want better for our kids. But that's an area that you should be able to, look at yourself and be like, oh, maybe I'm not doing all the things I need to. I mean, I know personally, I'm like, wow, I'm convicted. I need to, I need to do better. I need to model better, because there's always more we can do, especially in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to be very, very clear and intentional about what that is. I mean, the real popular, I think, reaction right now with a lot of young adults is almost the feeling, not the feeling, but regardless of the tradition that they grew up in church-wise, they have walked away thinking it is all about the rules and it's all about my behavior. Mm-hmm. I think even sometimes unintentionally as parents, we modeled this behavior-driven faith. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be embarrassed by your behavior, whether we're in a store or in a family event or wherever, so I uplift your behavior as the ultimate. And that translates in some ways, I think, unintentionally to our faith. Yeah. And that our faith is really just about our behavior. If you, live like a Christian in your behavior, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't hang around with people who do, and don't do that, then you must be a good Christian. But Scott, you mentioned earlier, like, it comes back down to the motive of your heart. Mm-hmm. And some people get paid a lot of money to act, but a lot of us are really good actors. Mm-hmm. Really good actors in that, like, man, I can play the part. I can walk through the doors of a church and I can play the part, really well. The question that we're asking during this series is like, is that what that is? Are you just playing this part, or is it the relationship that you talked about where, both of you talked about the fact that, if I'm in a relationship, then the motivation comes out of the relationship piece, it doesn't come out of like, well, if I can just do this, then people will think this. It comes out of like, I want to uplift, and I want to be, I don't know. I don't know that kids grow up thinking I just want my parents to be proud of me, in my faith, but that's a great question you guys ask at the marriage conference.
I think that you would want them to say that. You would hope that your kids would be proud of your faith, of all the things that they could be taking in. That should be one that really hits with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It can get really convicting really quick. Mm-hmm. If you look at how we look at the culture around us and how we define success of anything, or in how we define priority, because there's things in our world that are good and they're not evil, but are they the best priority for a family to grow up wanting to pass a faith along?
So that is a question as a parent, if you ask yourself, how to define success. That's actually another thing that came up during that breakout is, as a parent, how do I know that I'm doing a good job? Is it based on where your kids end up, like financially, career-wise, or is it where they end up, like spiritual growth-wise? There's so many different facets to look at, and I think, maybe just my opinion, but as a believer, I think if my children grow up to be adults that are just seeking God's will, the rest of it is less important. Mm-hmm. But I know that's probably very countercultural, and I feel like here, Maryland's been very different from all the other places I've lived in regards to the pace and the fact that we got here and met fifth graders who already had their college career like laid out and were literally having anxiety attacks because they got a B, like a fifth grader. Mm-hmm. That's like mind blowing to me. I think to say that I would measure my quote unquote success with it, it's directly proportional to how hard they're seeking God and His will for their life versus, what school they attend, how many zeros are on the end of their paycheck. Like that stuff is way less important to me. Because again, this is a blip in time, it's a blip in time. And I think it's David, right, that prayed, don't give me too much, but don't give me not enough. Mm-hmm. Give me just enough that I'm, seeking you and trusting you and count, I don't know that it's just, those are hard conversations to have, like to sit in a room of parents and say, oh, my kid's doing this, my kid's doing that. Oh, mine's not doing any of those things, but they're, they think they're called to do this other thing. And then everybody kind of looks at you sideways, it's hard to balance that with the expectations of the world.
Well, and we have so many of those things that the world has said is that this is the way you're supposed to do things, with, just look at all the retirement commercials on TV or the radio and, this financial advisor, this and this, and all this kind of stuff. And it, they set this thing up. If you're not in this group following this stuff, you're not, you've obviously got something wrong, but it's not a secret. It seems like a secret, but it's not. But Jesus said, seek first the kingdom and all these other things will be added unto you. And we either believe that or we don't.
Right.
And so as you're talking about how do you measure, and I think we look at those rule things that, because that's what we can measure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to measure someone's heart. But you talked about it once again Sunday, the Shema. Mm-hmm. Number one command: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so if you do that, if you seek first the kingdom, He all those other things will be added unto you. And so it's those things we need to instill in our kids. And the world is screaming very loudly that that's not so, that you have to do this, you have to pursue this, you got to drive this car, you got to live in this kind of house, you got to do that, that's the world is constantly, it's like one giant advertisement all the time, and, but we're supposed to in the world, but not of the world. And so to really be, to look at this place as we're sojourners, we're strangers, in a place that's not our own, and look at life that way. This is temporary. This is whatever. And we have those promises from God. That's the thing. It's, it doesn't mean you need to be a beggar somewhere, but God says, seek first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added unto you. And to try and drive that point home, first we have to model that, and realize, and rest in that. And then hopefully, your kids catch on to that. They see that, and that becomes their mantra too.
Right.
And but that
we live it out.
Yeah,
we live it out, and they see it. And to me that just brings me more peace than any kind of worldly security that you could offer.
Oh yeah,
and I think Randy and I have really tried to do that and tried to show that, we've had a lot of crazy in in the years, with all the kids and with my last career and with, health scares and all kinds of stuff that could have been, just really, really, really terrible that I think our kids saw that we had that foundation, that we were, I think I know we've talked about it in here before, it's not the God of what if, it's the God of even if. Even if these things happen, we're not going to change, we're still going to put our trust in him. And they've seen that, and they've learned how to deal with things in a similar way. And and you can extrapolate that to our whole walk. They have heard me say, when I was first getting back into the church thing and, putting like $20 in the plate, that when I was convicted and said, tithing is tithing, it's going to be this. And I've told the story many times, like we suddenly had more flexibility and disposable, quote unquote, income,
Who has disposable
after,
income?
Right. But after we made that change, we felt, it seemed like, and we did have more.
Yeah.
Because God's faithful, and in each instant, every time we have an opportunity to show that, practically to show it, like, hey, here we were faced with this thing. We trusted God, we prayed, we kept walking through it, and we ended up on the other side, and, and here we are. And every time we get a chance to show that, it just reinforces and reinforces and reinforces and helps to build that foundation that they need.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the Old Testament versus New Testament, and sometimes we think our culture is the most difficult in history to navigate through, but I as I was getting ready for Sunday, really like the almost the conflict between the two, Old Testament and New Testament, from a Jewish perspective. So as a Jewish parent, you take the Shema, and they were to, put it on their doorpost, and they were to, put it, so they literally took that literally and actually did it, and they would pray that prayer and pray that, and but then getting away from the Shema, it became more and more about what they were doing. And as the Pharisees kind of took over, and the Sadducees, it became more about like, here's all of these rules that you need to follow if you're going to be a good follower of God, if you will. Like, this is what's all necessary. And so they got away from that, but it still goes back to, the simple, maybe not simple, the clear command to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then they made it about all these other things that you have to do. and then Jesus comes on the scene in the New Testament. I never looked at the story in Luke 24 about the road to Emmaus, and that one verse where he's like, he explained how the scriptures pointed to him through all of these scriptures, and so it was a whole different way of thinking that the Jewish people had to grab a hold of, and so many still haven't. I think, and I think that's why we have to be careful. We have to be. The gospel has to be at the center of what we teach as parents now, because we want to stay grounded in the fact that the behavior, all of that goes back to what Jesus has said and what Jesus has done for us. And the more, we say it all the time here, probably every week almost, we talk about the fact that it's not about what I do, it's about who I am. It's about what Christ has done in me, and I think one of the biggest struggles for so many people is making that transformation when we talk about the renewing of our mind, of moving from that mentality of like, okay, I had this experience with God, whether it was at a church service or a concert or wherever it was, I had this experience with God, and the transformation is it changes who I am, in my own mind, and how I look at the world and how I look at God. But we tend to make it that it changes how I behave, I guess is what we say. So we have to make that shift as parents first, because kids see right through us, and so that shift has to happen. But I thought the conflict between the Old Testament and the New Testament was, and maybe conflict's the wrong word, but it makes that a really interesting conversation, because for sure we may be dealing with AI, but it's not the most tragic thing in the history of the world that's happened, and so many other generations have had to almost refocus and put the gospel back at the center of the relationship with the Lord, to move away from or move back from, it just becoming about that behavior that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's religion.
Yeah.
Right. It's. So as a kid, I grew up going to a Lutheran church, and we went to church on Sundays, went to Sunday school, went to church. When I was older, went to the Wednesday night, catechism classes and stuff. We said prayer before we ate, God is great, God is good, let's thank Him for food, amen. Right? Yes. And now I lay me down to sleep. You got all these things that are just when I say religion, I mean there's no thought or intentionality for me as a kid, personally. There was no thought or intentionality with any of it. It was just rote. It was this is just what you do, and without the intentionality, there's no connection. Mm-hmm. Talking about having to make it your own. Said many times, God doesn't have grandkids. God has kids. God has children. God does not have any grandchildren. You cannot rest on the faith of your parents or grandparents. We used to say all the time, man, me and my grandma and God, they're tight. If you need something, go to grandma, she'll pray for you. Kind of thing. But it's just that's just such wrong thinking. And interestingly, we talked in our fire group last night about some Old Testament, New Testament differences. And we were talking about the Spirit and how, the Spirit obviously present in the Old Testament, but in a different way. The Spirit's on David. The Spirit came on different, people for different purposes or whatever. Very different from, since Pentecost Spirit down. And talking about how Old Testament was the relationship with God was like taking a torch to the temple and handing it to the priest and letting him go do it. And then he comes back and it's just okay, now you're good. So you're just following these steps versus, there's a reason why like spread like a fire or the Spirit came like tongues of fire, because Now, instead of carrying the torch to one person and handing it to and having them be the intercessor, you're lighting the ground and it's taken off, because it's available to all of us, because it needs to be that personal decision and relationship, and that's your motivation. Because like you said, especially with kids, they know if you have different motives, right? They can sense it, if not straight up call you out on it. So you need to be honest and just really seek after, mean what you're doing. You have to mean what you're doing. You have to be intentional. They have to see that, or they won't pick it up. Well, I take that back. They will pick it up.
They'll pick up what you're doing.
The main point is what you're doing, they will do. So think about that. I mean, that may sound weighty, and it is. It is. It's as parents, your kids should be your primary responsibility when it comes to discipleship. It starts in the home. If it doesn't, it's almost like you don't have credibility to do it anywhere else if you don't do it there first. So.
Yeah, and like I said on Sunday, this could easily fall on some deaf ears if I come from a perspective of like, oh, well, I'm not a parent, so this isn't really a series for me, But if we're going to pass the gospel on to the next generation, it really is the responsibility of anybody who comes in contact with the next generation, and we really all should be in contact with the next generation, on some level.
Well, in some way, you almost carry more weight sometimes because there comes a time when the kid's kind of breaking free from mom and dad. I remember when my son got married in Arkansas, there was an older gentleman that had befriended my son, but became like a mentor to him. So I made it a point to go and sit down with him and thank him, for kind of taking my place, because that's necessary. And so just because they're not your kid doesn't mean you don't have influence.
Absolutely.
We have a great deal of influence. You might be that voice just in a passing comment that changes things for someone. You never know. Tell you an interesting, I'm going to brag on my wife for just a second. We went to a birthday party Sunday after church. And the party was for a kid that my wife was a third grade teacher. She taught third grade. This kid was going to college, okay, and wanted my wife to be there. And so much so that we got there and everybody was lovely. It was just a wonderful thing. Apparently, later on, his mom pulled Linda aside and took her out, and said, he was so moved by the fact that you came, he had to go outside and pull himself back together. This is a 17-year-old boy going to college. And they had pictures of the kids. There was two boys, two were cousins that were both going off to school. So they did this big party for him. And they had pictures of them all growing up and stuff and everything. And one of the pictures they came and gave my wife was a picture of her in the middle with him and him, pictures of him around it. And she's a teacher, not his mom. But, so we have influence on people, and it might be that, like that casual comment, it might be a little bit deeper, say I need somebody to talk to, whatever, so just because they're not your kid. And I love it, the fact that we do baby dedications like Sunday. You have, we do it all the time. You had everybody stand up. Now it's the church's time to respond, because we do. We have a role.
Yeah.
And so I know my behavior could shatter someone if they I thought he was a Christian.
Yeah.
And so we carry an awesome responsibility in those areas.
Yeah.
And so not to be taken lightly. It's powerful.
Yeah.
That's I'll say this. That's not just true for kids, right? You should be walking with integrity. That should be true for within your social circles, when you're at work, when you're coaching a team, like that should be true all the time, because when you're in a group, there's going to be like kind of a predominant type of interactions that happen, I guess is the best way I could say. And if you're in the minority of that, you're eventually probably going to start picking up those things too, right? It's part of the reason why, as a parent, you should be careful about who your kids hang out with, because behaviors kind of cross over, and they, I'll say cross-contaminate. That can be in a positive way or a negative way. So that's true in every relationship, in any interaction with people. The way that you act, the way that you treat people is going to have an effect on that person. That's I think a lot of adults, that's why they start questioning, like, why are you talking to me this, why are you being nice to me? Why are you being respectful? What? And it kind of can raise the question and make them seek after, what's different about a believer. It's just that kids are way more malleable. So you have to be more careful. They're quicker to kind of latch on to something and run with it. But I think that consistency thing is very important. And to piggyback on it doesn't matter if you have kids or not, half of the Royal Ranger leaders are dads whose boys are in the program because they're doing it alongside them, like me. And it's fantastic, but only half, the rest of the guys are there, number one, because we needed help, and number two, because they think it's, a worthwhile endeavor, which it is. And every single interaction with the boys, they're seeing guys who are in agreement about these things being important. So that is driving home the fact that maybe we should consider this is important. All these guys, had conversations with like the older boys, like we're here. This isn't like a paid thing. We're here because we think it's important for you guys to hear it, and to see that this is legit. This is real. You guys need to, take it seriously. And every person that comes in and does that reinforces that, and that's super important.
You're going back. I have a theory. There are no such thing as adults. We're just a bunch of old kids. And the reason I say that is because there's no magic number that you hit where you suddenly, because, and, hear me out, but we carry everything from our childhood into our adulthood,
absolutely.
Our quote unquote adulthood. And so we may be getting older in years wise, but you're still the same person. And so, you still are susceptible. We always talk about peer pressure with kids. It's just as bad, if not worse, with adults. Keeping up with the Joneses. Where do you think that came from?
Yeah, right. Right.
All those things. And so, to live with integrity, I think a good question to ask ourselves is, if someone was forced to spend a week with you, will they be more like Jesus at the end of the week? Or they would be repulsed by Jesus in you?
Yeah.
So, that's a question. And if you can't answer that question right, you might want to do some investigation into yourself. But yeah, so we're that's everywhere. And that's especially and for us is as pastors, that weight is very heavy, because it really makes you think, twice about being flippant with somebody, seeing somebody in a store, you're whatever, and not recognize, it's not that we're not acting. It's to be real.
Yeah.
And that, these things are important.
Yeah.
And so, the Bible even says every word spoken, every idle word spoken, we're going to give an account for.
Yeah.
That was written there for a reason,
Slow to speak. Be slow to speak.
What's that?
Be slow to speak.
Yeah. Quick to listen, slow to speak. But, all those things.
At the end of the day, pastors, you are people. You are people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when you said earlier, Aaron, about, we think we live in the most difficult, kind of civilization and time and stuff. there's nothing new under the sun, and people are people.
Yeah.
So from the time there have been two, we've been in the human condition.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I say, it's so bad now. Like, Dan, no, you didn't live in Corinth. It was really bad.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah,
I've been kinda hanging
nobody's
on.
pulling up in a van at Life Church to load them up and take them to fight lions or anything. So.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to a celebration of life tomorrow for a lady who escaped Latvia in World War II, you know.
Wow.
And so we talk about, again, we talk about, you know, how awful our
life is so
culture
hard,
and it's so hard. But I mean, holy cow, like there's been times, and like you said, since Genesis 3, since the fall, like people have been people. And so, you know, so there's going to be difficult times. And, you know, that idea that, and it happens in the most mundane circumstances, that somebody hears something that you say or watches something that you do, and it resonates with them from a gospel perspective, you know, and it can be a teacher, it can be a coach. I mean, some of my biggest influences in my life were coaches, you know, who made it very clear to us as players that it's not, the goal of this is not about whatever sport we were playing. The goal of this is to develop, you know, leaders who are going to carry the gospel, you know, and be able to handle difficult situations and things like that. And teachers, the same thing. Like, and one of the things I think from anybody listen to this, anybody who was there on Sunday, like if we think back about our journey with Christ, there are people in our journey who weren't our parents, like you said. There are people in our journey who may have been very short-lived in our journey and yet had a significant impact on our relationship with Christ, you know, and so we can never take for granted, you know. Right now, we have a lot of young people who attend here on a Sunday morning. You know, a lot of young adults from high school. We still have a group of high school students whose parents don't go to church, and they just come to church. And so there's adults, there's other older kids, you know, here each week who may just have a quick conversation, but that quick conversation is part of their spiritual journey of these kids, and it connects them hopefully to the gospel, you know, when they're, you know, and so when they look back years from now, it's like, well, and that's why it's amazing as a teacher, and Linda has experienced it this week, you know, when a kid who you haven't talked to or thought about necessarily in many years, you know, it happens on Facebook sometimes, like, hey, you know, but when they're saying like, but you had a significant impact on my life, you know, for Christ, you know, and that's what this whole, like, building up the next generation in the gospel is all about. Like,
it's great. It's great when you get to see it. Right?
Yes.
Because I know it's come up a lot. The, you know, one's planting and one's watering, and God brings the increase. And one of the hardest things for us to deal with is we want to see the results.
Yes.
And when you get to, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's like, wow, I didn't even know, you know? And there's some level of this, like you talking about the, you know, the large number of kids who come, you know, without their parents, but they're coming and they're, you know, seeking, that it can almost make you hesitant to even want to say anything because you don't want to get in the way. But you shouldn't hold back from it. But you should be aware of the weight that the things you say and do carry.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it just circles right back around to intentionality. You know, be intentional, and you don't have to have like the golden nugget of wisdom for the week. You just be welcoming and loving, and hey, you know, how's everything go? That is totally acceptable and kind of counterculture. You know, to actually care about somebody else instead of being super self-focused.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll tell you something that And Stacy shared with me the other day about VBS last week, and that is that for the first time that it was really recognizable. Last week there were so many men who were crew leaders, during VBS, and it's very, very women heavy, girl heavy, as far as serving in that capacity. But what we're beginning to see in our faith community is men beginning to realize that, it is part of my responsibility to carry the gospel to the next generation. And I can do that, not through just doing something manly like camp and trip or a bonfire or going fishing. And I mean, those are all great, but I can do it in a simpler way of like saying, hey, I'm just going to be a crew leader, for VBS for a week. And I'm going to have these 5 kids that I just have the opportunity to get to know a little bit and talk to throughout the week. And I don't think guys necessarily understand it until it actually happens. But I guarantee you that if there's those crews that had men leaders, and it happens with women too, but on Sunday morning when those kids came to church on Sunday morning, they were looking for that crew leader.
Oh yeah.
And when they see him, they're like, man, they go up and that relationship has now been built.
Right.
And so there's like you said earlier, Scott, there's a respect there that comes from those kids. There's almost a camaraderie that happens in those moments that as a guy, if I think like, that VBS stuff, that's for the girls, and that's that's not really my thing. I'll move some tables and pick up some chairs and and maybe work in the games. No, take the time to engage, and be those older kids who are walking alongside these younger kids, and just saying, hey, we're gonna have a great week, and let me tell you a little bit about Jesus this week. And
yeah, I think it. Again, it's not that it doesn't happen with women leaders too, but I think there's like a different. It's almost like from a kid's perspective, maybe men seem more unapproachable. Mm-hmm. So when you are seen by them, it just affects differently. And there are definitely lots of studies and things that show about men leading, statistically how effective it's going to be in the house if the man is bringing them to church, if the husband is versus the wife and stuff. And part of that is it's just the way God designed it. It's nothing beyond that. But it does affect them differently. But you see kids run up to, the women that were the leaders and give them a hug and do all that stuff too. So it just comes down to connection. Yeah. It's connection. And again, being intentional, because if you're there, for VBS, you show up 5 nights, the first couple of days, the kids are a little, leery of you kind of not, I know last year when I was a leader, I couldn't this year, but last year when I was a leader, by day 4 or 5, they're all into it. They're fired up and they are looking for you on Sundays to fist bump. And
absolutely.
Because it's an investment and they know that they instinctivly recognize the fact that, they are important to you. Mm-hmm. So,
so we finished up on Sunday with, go and make disciples, and we're all called to go. And we're all called to teach them to observe, not just what God has done, which was the first step, like remember what God has done, but to teach them to observe what God has called us to do and how Christ has taught us to live, And so we want to keep that as the main focus in whatever circumstance God has placed you to serve that next generation, because again as we say all the time, they are the church right now, and so many of those kids are starting school in a couple of weeks, and they are the witnesses for the gospel in their school each and every day. And so being able to encourage them when they walk in here on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, is huge, for the sake of the gospel, I would love to see some of our younger kids, going into their schools and just to watch to see how they interact with their fellow students, because I've heard some of those younger kids like share testimonies that are so rock solid, as a 7, 8-year-old, they know what they believe and they know why they believe it. And they don't have a problem telling you. And so,
That's good.
It needs to be strong because, the flip side of that is, why am I the only one in my class that's not allowed to have a phone? Why am I the only one that can't watch the show that everybody else is talking about? I mean, that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. And that continues to be hard, like you said, Pastor Greg, all the way through adulthood. You don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
Right. But you can connect differently.
Yeah. Well, Pastor Steve's going to continue this week with our second week. And so if you're out there, a parent or not a parent, the challenge this week was to engage with somebody in your life who is the next generation, and encourage them and lift them up and have a gospel conversation if that's what's necessary. But we want to build up the body of Christ, and the next generation is part of that body. And so we want to continue to do that. So any last thoughts before we go?
I finally found who said the quote. It says, preach the gospel at all times and when absolutely necessary, use words. It's St. Francis of Assisi.
Really?
Yeah.
It goes back that far.
Yeah. But that falls right in line with, if you don't live it, what you say don't matter.
Yeah.
So preach the gospel at all, the way you live. And then when you need to explain it, that's when you use words.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to LCC Remix. If you have any questions about this podcast, reach out via email at lccremix@lifechurchcalvert.com. LCC Remix is a podcast ministry of Life Church Calvert located in Huntingtown, Maryland. You can visit our website, lifechurchcalvert.com, or download our app by searching Life Church Calvert in your app store today.